welcome to the next installment of the Train Maker. In this video, I'll talk about some of the culture war issues surrounding public transport. So that means that by the end of this video, there will probably be very few people I haven't offended. So just watch as long as you can, and there'll also be some footage of trains, ferries, and buses.
My children go to Christian school, not one of the expensive Anglican schools, but a normal Christian school. What's noticeable there is that very few children go to school by public transport, walking, or cycling. Yes, that may be because families don't live right close to school or too far away, but it's also cultural, I think. In Christian circles, children are very, very important, so a protective attitude may have turned into the expectation to drive children to school. And there also seem to be fewer urban Christians that consciously make their lives more eco-friendly. But there are also many Christians that are vehemently opposed to public transport. One of those was the former Minister of Transport of New Zealand. He is quite open about his Christian faith, as well as his opposition to all that is woke, and that includes public transport in most cases, but of course most clearly cycling, which is terribly woke for him. What's even more, he was so convinced of the cause that he knowingly misrepresented matters in the interest of opposing the woke. For him, the end justified the means. Giving false testimony is normally not what Christians should be doing, even in pursuit of a greater end. But it seems to be something that's quite common in the culture wars. That's the sort of Christian attitude to public transport I want to talk about. But first of all, I'll take a step back. Clearly, transport is not a central Christian concern. It's not core teaching like the Trinity, the forgiveness of sins, or the hope of the resurrection. It's not even as important as church governance or regular Bible reading. Christians can and do have different opinions on it. So, why might Christians support public transport? Well, because it connects people and enables them to participate more fully in life. It enables access to employment, recreation and social opportunities, to government and health services, to education, art and church. It generates economic activity so that people can flourish. I think those are the basic reasons to support a transport system. However, for personal travel, another mode has become more popular since the middle of the last century, namely the private motor vehicle. So, why might a Christian support public transport in certain cases over private motorized transport? Well, here are a few points. One, well, for most people, a public transport system enables more access. Even in our car-focused world, about 1/3 of the population can't drive. That's the young, the old, the disabled, and, well, those who are not able to do it for other reasons. Approximately 1/2 of those can use public transport independently. The other 1/6 of the population always will need some assistance when moving around. So, in urban areas at least, public transport gives access to more people. Two, countries that are built with public transport generally make it easier for all people to access services. Another point is that public transport is less harmful to the environment in terms of energy use, land use, and pollution. Caring for the environment is important for Christians. Fourth point, public transport focused cities are generally not as ugly, and Christians care for beauty. Fifth point, public transport is healthier for the population, and as people who follow Jesus who healed regularly, we should encourage better health. And sixth, public transport allows more encounters in the neighborhood and acceptance of others. So Those are some of the possible reasons I thought of why Christians should support public transport. There are also some Christian arguments for promoting a more car-centric transport system. These are, and they're a little bit difficult, but I hope get them right. One, you can argue that as far as governance is concerned, the Bible favors localized decision making over centralized administration. Now, I won't go into details of why that is and how you can read that, but uh, it can be said that public transport is quite often centralized, while road planning may be less so. But of course, with private motor vehicles, we are often beholden to multinationals, so that's another issue there. Then, two, the church has a century-long memory of government overreach and control, and to some people, such control seems easier with public transport than private motor vehicles. However, we have to say here that this indicates that opposition to public transport is often the result of your social situation rather than deep reflection. Third point, there is an argument that a transport system based on private motor vehicles allows the rich to use up some of their wealth by signaling their status instead of increasing their economic advantage. In other words, if the wealthy use their money to buy useless things like a fancy car, then they can't use that money to buy influence or buy up more important assets. And by burning that money, so to say, uh, the overall system generates more equality while keeping the capitalist incentives intact. The other way of saying that is, well, you can access transport if you've got an old car or fancy new car, but that's the gist of the argument. Well, I think matters like health and caring for the environment are more important than those arguments. But clearly, there can be a difference of views among Christians. Among my predecessors as vicars, there was one who was an enthusiastic supporter of the railway in the 19th century, when there weren't any motor cars around. One who was active in opposing motorways in Christchurch, and one who was an ardent motorbike fan. So you can see the variety. I don't think it is public transport as such that generates much opposition among some Christians, but rather its association with other things, and in particular, its association with woke ideas. Well, the woke ideas, they are a more or less coherent set of ideas taken from various streams. There are some concerns that derive from a Christian heritage, namely care for the oppressed, being alert to injustice, the identification and rejection of evil in society, the importance of people over wealth, and a sense that the last shall be first. Of course, missing from wokeism, so to say, is any sense of grace and forgiveness. It has also taken on aspects of the environmental movement, of Marxism, of critical race theory, and feminism. Even with its Christian heritage, the woke are quite critical of Christianity and Judaism. Those religions are seen as part of the evil patriarchy and have to be dismantled. Wokeism is also critical of much of Western culture in a sense of wanting to reject everything traditional. It seems they are like children rebelling against their parents. Many woke folk support public transport and don't like private motor vehicles, in theory at least. In part, that's because some of the groups dear to them are hurt by the current dominant transport system, particularly in the United States. And that there's probably also a sort of urban-rural divide here, with the woke more likely to be urban, and particularly in the United States, those opposed to them being normally more rural. Many Christians have been alarmed by this attack by the woke on things they hold dear, and so the camps have become hardened. Anything the woke support, these Christians oppose, and anything that Christians hold dear, the woke oppose. As a result of that, many Christians have also associated with a more welcoming right wing politics, which is generally supportive of corporate welfare capitalism and critical of environmental protection. Well, and private motor vehicles are more profitable for many big corporates. They are smarted, but due to the opposing camps, public transport and bikes have become part of the culture wars.
Well, I don't think it's helpful for Christians to just be anti-woke without considering the issues. Yes, there are things that they should oppose, but there are also things that the woke maybe support that are good and true, at least in part. And so it's important to be more discerning.